Welcome back to Proxy, everybody, and today I'm with the Dead of Night once again, a valued member of the community, and we're going to be talking about a little bit of a weird counter to orcs that we've kind of been talking about over the last week or so. So, Dead of Night, what's up, man? How you doing?
Good. How have you guys been?
I've been fantastic.
Well, I guess you guys too. Everybody.
Well, I have multiple personalities, just like any good Eldar, right? Um, but we're talking about the classic Azurman here and Dire Vendors today. And speaking of multiple personalities, how many dead Exarchs are actually in Azurman? Probably thousands of them. But what do you think? So you really kind of brought this to everybody's attention. So I'm going to give you the credit for it. I didn't even think about it. I'll be completely honest. I had no idea this was actually good until you actually suggested it, and I did the math for it, and the math looked good. So what do you think? Tell me a little bit about what you were saying the other day about Zerman and Dire Avengers actually being really effective into Orc Boys and the Green Tide.
Okay, yeah. So, yeah, kind of the math that me and Proxy like we were doing, it seems comparable to the math of our Wind Riders that everybody's looking at. But you have to take into account the Overwatch, the free Overwatch. But I also think that extra Overwatch is sick for the Orc Tide.
Yeah, because it's like, what you were saying earlier was, yeah, Wind Riders are really good in the shooting phase, but their Overwatch isn't quite as strong. So what Dire Avengers have that Wind Riders don't is this pretty good Overwatch with lethal hits, right? So like normally orcs are toughness 5, they're pretty hard to wound, but with lethal hits, they actually become quite powerful at dealing damage to them. And the other thing is, yeah, you get a free Overwatch with a Zerman that
Yeah,
can
so
be an
you can
addition.
Overwatch your bikes and
Yeah,
this. Yeah,
absolutely. So, what we were kind of talking about is, the thought process behind taking 2 units of Wind Riders that can, over the course of 4 turns, kill an entire army of Orc Boys under the Green Tide may actually not be needed because we could have, a Zerman and Dire Avengers fulfill the same role as 9 Wind Riders.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah, I and you also get Ass Man's melee element as well. He hits so hard.
right.
Probably less hard these days because everybody has feel no pain except us. But
Well, even so, I mean, he has damage 3. So feel no pain
exactly.
doesn't really, I mean, it doesn't do anything. I mean, the Orc Boys are not going to be able to pass. I mean, knock on wood, maybe they won't be able to pass like 1 or 2, but not a lot of them, you know?
Right.
So he has 6 attacks. He can kill at least 5 orcs, you know?
Yeah, or finish off a tank or that
Right.
chaos demon that's in your back line for no reason.
Yeah, I mean, he has other uses, right? I mean, if you look at a Zerman, yeah, he's kind of expensive, but he's also one of the few characters that can save on a 3 plus. Always,
Yep.
right? 3 plus
Also,
invul means even your threes, your fate dice of threes, have a use in your games.
what's neat too with these Dire Avengers is they have assault weapons, which is good for secondary use,
Hmm.
and it makes it so their threat range really is a lot greater than what it appears. You know.
Right. Exactly. Right. So let's go down to Dire Avengers really quick because I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about them because they are a unit that has a stigma currently as one of the worst aspects in the entire index. And of course, as we know, Howling Banshees are probably no longer the worst in a lot of people's minds because they're now cheaper, right? They're cheap enough
Yeah.
to warrant taking and listen. Actually, for those of you out there saying Howling Banshees, still a garbage, at 70 points, I mean, they trade very well with so many units that are competitive. I mean, they trade up against things like infiltrators from Space Marines. How many Space Marine players do you guys know that run infiltrators? Well, infiltrators are
Exactly.
100 points, you know? Like they're a pretty penny, and Howling Banshees trade up easily against them, which is awesome. And you definitely don't want to keep infiltrators around the whole game because they'll just mess your swooping hawks up and stuff like that with their 12-inch no deep strike. So yeah, Dire Avengers though, on the other hand, somebody in the Discord mentioned it, and I think this sums it up perfectly. They're kind of like a nothing burger as far as like what they do for the Eldar army in general. Like if you think about in the past meta, what do they actually do for the Eldar army? Well, they have some anti-infantry power, but swooping hawks basically can do the same thing, right? They have a very similar stat line as far as their
For
shooting,
sure.
you know. Um, so they're not very mobile. They're pretty slow. They're not as durable as other aspect warriors, which sounds really bizarre for Eldar because none of our stuff is durable, but these guys even less so, right? I mean, like a 4+ save. I mean, these guys have a
Why?
guardian.
Why?
Yeah, absolutely, man. They have a guardian save, right? I mean, essentially. So a lot of players look at Dire Avengers like, man, these guys really suck. They have almost no mobility. I'm almost kind of, forced to buy a transport for them in some cases. But we have seen a few changes recently, like the transport, or excuse me, the indirect fire nerfs, which basically every single army out there who had strong indirect fire got a nerf. So we're going to be
Oh,
seeing, we're not going to be seeing as much indirect spam, I think. We'll still see some, but we won't see a ton of it. So maybe Dire Avengers don't need an expensive transport.
well, one of my favorite things about Dire Avengers too is they do not look threatening at all.
Right.
So opponent half the time just leaves them alone.
Their reputation kind of works for them a little bit, is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Yeah, of being terrible. And that's not nothing. I think like a lot of players get this twisted, but the mind games of meta versus non-meta units is actually something that can play a big factor in a unit being effective or not. I said this in kind of the more beginning of the edition before Storm Guardians got their recent buffs and people started playing them a lot in tournaments. But, I mentioned, these guys are actually good, and I got a lot of feedback from the community who was like, dude, you're crazy. These guys are terrible. I mean, even Auspex Tactics did this video where like a wide number of the community in a poll said that Storm Guardians were one of the worst units in the entire index. I was just like, but guys, they're not. But that was the thought. So when I went up against a lot of my buddies, they completely ignored them.
Exactly.
And they ended up doing great. And it's like, yeah, if you ignore a unit that's actually low key good, like they can do great things. And I think Dire Avengers are maybe the same way, is what you're saying, right?
Yeah, exactly. And also, like at the end of the day, if you look at the Dire Avenger squad, it's just I like to look at it as 11 more wounds for a ass man. That's all it is at the end of the day.
Hey, you and your ass, man.
He's got like 16 wounds.
Right. He's just a 16 wound character. Well, in a lot of
Exactly.
ways, that can actually make sense if your opponent is rushing right into your Dire Avengers. Like, I think really where this squad is going to shine is in the current meta, because I think what we're going to see, especially since now we know that the Chaos Space Marines are going to have a lot of really good close combat guys. Like they're going to have units that are going to be exceptional in close combat. Warp Talons, if you haven't heard of the Warp Talon
Oh
thing,
yeah.
Warp Talons are insane now. They basically never die. They're as uninteractive as, things can be, essentially, just being permanently in reserve and just, killing something, going back into reserve. Well, Dire Avengers are actually a pretty decent counter to that, right? I mean, at least to a unit of five. At least if somebody's running just a unit of five Warp Talons, if the Warp Talons try to go after the Dire Avengers, they're going to be killed because they're going to be overwatched on minimum of 5+, but oftentimes a 4+ if you're on an objective.
Dire Avengers, like they have such a hard following in the community too. Everybody loves them, but
Oh
nobody
well,
wants to play with them right now.
absolutely, yeah. Well, they're like back in okay, so like when I first started playing Eldar, way back, like in third edition, the Dire Avengers were a really cool unit because well, back then they were a little bit better in combat. A lot of people remember this. They had, I think they had this Exarch power called Distraction or something, Distracting Gesture, and the Exarch basically made enemies, it made them harder to hit in close combat. And the Exarch himself had something called the Dire Sword. I know the Dire Sword's still a thing, but it's nowhere near what it used to be. It used to be
That's sort of
this.
gross.
Oh, it was disgusting.
Yeah.
If you suffered a wound from a Dire Sword, you took a leadership check. If you failed, you died. You were removed from play.
Goodbye.
It was just goodbye. So, there were times when I'd have an opponent charge a unit of Dire Avengers in 3rd edition with like a Demon Prince, and I'd have that Dire Sword ready for them. And they would be so afraid of that thing, they wouldn't even charge. They'd be like, do I really want. Because they're going to be striking first. Exarchs used to be really fast. They always struck first, basically. You know? So it's like,
Yeah.
do I want to actually get hit by a Dire Sword and, if I fail my leadership check, I'm dead? No. But, nowadays, they're purely a shooting unit, right? They have no combat ability whatsoever, but the cool thing about them is they have that Overwatch. So we were looking at the Green Tide, right? And if we think about it in these terms, orcs really don't have a lot of shooting. Like I've seen several games of the new orcs, and I have a game coming up against the Green Tide myself to kind of test how they are. Their shooting is very abysmal, and it's probably going to stay that way. Like Green Tide shooting is awful. I think the
Yeah.
only good shooting is possibly, I think it's Speed Freaks might be okay. But other than that, they just don't look good. So no orc player is going to have great shooting. So you can take that out of there. Dire Avengers aren't going to get shot up, but Dire Avengers can move up, shoot a unit of orc boys, a unit of 20, and kill about 9 of them with guide, right? Just straight up with a Zerman, just kill 9 of
Yep.
them. And then when they declare their move, which they will because orcs need to move, in Overwatch you kill about 6 more, right? So if we factor in that orcs get a, rerolls of 1 when their 10 boys are over, you're looking at about 13 or 14 kills against an orc boy unit. So they'll charge in with the remaining, and most likely your Dire Avengers will die, especially on a
Well,
WA turn.
you gotta
But,
think too. You gotta
you
think
know,
too, though. We got our free Overwatch, so if you
right.
position yourself, decently,
Hmm.
if the Dire Avengers have a good supporting unit with them, you got your second Overwatch.
Right. And that's absolutely correct, right? So, like, a unit of Wind Riders could overwatch when the Orc Boy unit starts their move, right? So basically, for you guys who don't know the sequencing on this, when somebody moves a unit, they have to declare it's moving, first of all. Once they declare it's moving, you can overwatch if you have the range and, other requirements. So a unit of
Yeah.
Wind Riders can start off by overwatching them, killing several, probably, I don't know the exact math, but I think it's like 6, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken,
we'll
with
call it
guide or
5.
something. Yeah,
Yeah, we'll call it 5.
some like 5, yeah, whatever, right?
Easy, yeah.
Easy 5. You got sustained hits, you got, rerolls to hit because they're probably going to be, on an objective at some point. So you got that. Then they move forward. At the end of their movement, you can declare Overwatch with the Dire Avenger unit because of Zerman's ability, right? Which says you can declare Overwatch even if you've already declared it this turn. So then you overwatch them again. So that's basically a full unit of orcs killed before they can even get into range of you, right? Just from shooting an Overwatch.
The only thing I want to add on to that
Mm-hmm.
proxy is for sequencing. Like usually when I'm in that scenario with the Dire Avengers,
Mm-hmm.
I'll shoot the Dire Avengers first in the move phase, then save my actual CP Overwatch for the assault phase. Generally,
Oh, interesting.
that way you can let opponent finish their move and kind of see what's going on because generally what they're going to charge for the most part.
So interesting.
You
So
know what I
let
mean?
me let me get this straight because okay, so let's go back to Azerman because that's actually an interesting point, and I like it too because it gives you some more options.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so you fire the Wind Riders first. You shoot their Overwatch in the movement phase,
No, I'm
and then you
saying,
wait, right,
yeah, yeah. Wait
to
till they
shoot
assault,
to shoot the Dire Avengers in the assault phase.
or vice versa. I kind of prefer it vice versa. So you shoot the Dire Avengers first,
Hmm.
so that's free Overwatch, done. Then you save your CP one because if there's a different charge, maybe you want to shoot Overwatch over there. You know what I mean?
I
Or
don't.
opponent finishes
You
their move
mean you mean if
phase.
you had like a second unit of Dire Avengers somewhere else? Because I
No,
think.
I'm saying if you have a different unit to Overwatch with
Uh,
in general on the board.
okay, because I think now. Correct me if I'm wrong, and people in the comments will probably correct me, but I think that you can only use the tactical acumen ability if you've already overwatched something else first, because you can use it for 0 CP, but then you can't overwatch anything else because of the way it's worded. So like
No, I'm pretty sure you can use them first if you wanted.
you could, but then I
Yeah.
don't think you could overwatch something else later because it says I may be wrong, but once per
Oh, you're
turn.
saying based off of what the Overwatch says?
Yeah,
The
based off of
Overwatch
what the
rule?
Overwatch and what the ability says. Right? So like once per turn you can target this model's unit with fire overwatch stratagem for 0 CP, and you can do so even if you've already used that stratagem on a different unit this phase. Right? The keyword there being this phase.
Ah, yes. I see.
Right? So like that's what I'm thinking. So like at the end of the phase, it stops being relevant.
Yep.
So I mean you could still do what you're
Oh,
saying. It's
yeah,
just you wouldn't be
yeah,
able
exactly.
to overwatch twice in that case, which
I mean, you still do it
right.
in the assault phase, yeah.
Right. Well, I like what you said because if you're not planning on overwatching twice, it's better to wait until the assault phase sometimes if they don't have any shooting, right? So
Yeah,
like
yeah.
if you're going against orcs, they're not going to shoot you, they're going to advance or whatever and they're not going to waste their time shooting 20, you know, sluggas. I mean, you know what's funny? I've actually never seen in a tournament once an orc player waste time shooting slugga pistols at anything. I've never seen it.
I never shoot our pistols. Shame on me.
Oh, yeah, shame on you. They're shuriken pistols, man. You got to shoot them. Yeah. I mean, I
Yeah.
guess if I was timed and it didn't matter, I wouldn't do it. But
Well, I couldn't tell you the last time I was running Storm Guardians or Howling Banshees
you really
or
don't like Storm
Scorpion.
Guardians, do you? You have a problem with Storm. You're anti-Storm Guardian, dude.
I'm anti-Guardian.
You're Guardianist.
Their only job should be flying our tanks around.
Oh my god. Yeah, for sure, dude. Um, I really like the lore around Eldar basically being one with their vehicles. You know what I mean? Like,
So I think my next game I'm gonna try out a Sermon of the Dire Avengers with a 10 pack of spiders as their
hmm.
support
Oh, that's
unit.
nice. I think that's nice too. That's a
So I think
really
that
good
double
double.
Overwatch would be nasty.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, I mean, that's just good against everything at that point because you're dealing the mortals and you're dealing the lethal hits with the Dire Avengers. Which is great.
Yeah, and you got dev wounds on a Sermon if things get weird.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is like if your Dire Avengers do get charged, like a Zerman can clean up whatever charges them. You know what I mean? Like pretty
Yeah.
well. I think Dire Avengers might actually be a good answer to like Chaos Space Marine, cultist lists or lists that use cultists. So for those of you guys out there who don't know and who haven't kept up on the Chaos Space Marine stuff, there's a new Chaos Space Marine detachment called the Deceptors, and they basically get to choose, I think it's like up to 3 units in their army, and they get to infiltrate them with characters. Well, there's a new cultist character as well, and cultists are really cheap, so you can take them in a unit of 20 and just spread them out across the entire battlefield. You know how I've been, kind of talking about rangers and like what you should do with rangers and mandrakes and things like that to screen out infiltrators and move block. Well, now they can do the same thing, but kind of better because they have a bigger unit. So Dire Avengers are really good at stopping that early on in the game because as soon as that unit of cultists moves forward, they're going to get overwatched. and they're going to lose a lot of their models. So they're not going to be able to, screen out your models as well. So if you're running things like the Avatar of Cain and you really need to get the Avatar to a certain place in the battlefield early, or you're running things like Storm Guardians and they really need to move up, the cultists are just not going to be able to, survive if they go first with Overwatch. They're going to lose a lot of models, you know?
What other units do you think are like? I think there. When I think of support units with the Dire Avengers, I think of just other good Overwatch units. So that's why
Yeah.
I'm saying like the 10 pack of spiders, your 9 pack of shrieking cannon bikes. What else is nasty at Overwatch that we have like that? I guess swooping hawks maybe.
They can, for sure. With I think probably though you're gonna get less mileage out of them in Overwatch versus something like Wind Riders. Just because with the Wind Riders you're just getting auto hits, with sustained hits.
Right.
So you'd really need like guide support, and I think you can only have one guide, right? I mean, and that's why Wind Riders work well because they get a pseudo guide,
To get their auto guide,
right?
yeah.
And Warp
I
Spiders
don't.
don't need to hit, so they don't need guide. So yeah, like I think those units work really well with Dire Avengers because they have abilities that say, no, we don't really need guide to operate well, but Dire Avengers do need guide, right? So
Yeah.
that's the
We're,
thing.
we're I think we're literally on the cusp of Beotan.
I think we are. I think that's where the meta has gone. It used to be Iandin with Bealtan like support, and now it's like literally just Bealtan with like maybe some Samhan support with Wind Riders.
Yeah, that's
And like
exciting.
maybe a guardian unit or something. Yeah, I mean it's funny how the meta's changed, but it was kind of predictable because of how many people were running just wraith bricks and stuff, and like GW
Yeah.
is eventually going to nerf, and that's just going to happen. But that is interesting. So
Yeah, I've liked the Dire Avengers with the Sermon the entire edition. I've played a bunch of games with them. I've been a super fan. I know a lot of guys in your Discord have definitely had some really cool games with him too.
yeah, for sure. Definitely before Phantasm nerfed, got nerfed. I was really a fan because you could essentially make them almost uninteractable in a way against conventional weaponry, which I thought was really powerful. Unfortunately, that got nerfed. So, man,
I do have one other thought on like running Dire Avengers, and
hmm
that is in Falcons.
hmm,
I think I know it's like strange, but like you get all those shots with a wound reroll
right.
out of the Falcon. I feel like it could be kind of neat if you have all 15 Dire Avengers together.
Yeah, like running as a pack kind of thing, like out of a
Yeah,
deep strike. I've thought
yeah.
of that before.
Come out,
Well, yeah,
they
for sure.
shoot, jump back in the Falcons.
Right, right. It would be really cool if they could actually just move back into the Falcons like some other factions get, like the new Chaos Space Marine abilities,
Right.
but unfortunately, Phantasm doesn't allow us to get back into transports. Only Chaos Space Marines can do that, guys. But man, for you guys out there who are thinking like how Chaos Space Marines, how powerful they're going to be really strong. Green Tide, the last I checked, they had like a 67% win rate, something crazy. And even
I,
Bully Boys had above 50. So
I think we're about to be in the doghouse for like another 6 months at least.
it's going to be tough. But get this, right? Like, and I'll probably make a separate video about this, but new mission pack came out, got announced from GW. It's going to be here within a couple of months, probably in the next balance data slate. We're going to see this come out, Pariah Nexus. So I'm going to be discussing that at a different time. But it looks to be pretty strong for Eldar. There looks to be some cool tricks that we can pull off with our units, that will really give us an edge. But yeah, I think our only real tools right now to dealing with a lot of the very strong I would even say oppressive because if you're at a 67% win rate, that's a pretty oppressive style of army.
Oh
Um,
yeah,
you know, I mean, big time, right? If that happens,
definitely.
then our only tools are really Wind Riders and like whatever else we can come up with, which is why it's so cool that Dire Avengers seem to be a good counter as well. You know, and they're just cool. I mean,
Well,
they're
the other, th-
unconventional.
the other thing that's really cool about them is they can shoot at literally anything and just get some chip damage in if you need it, just like swooping
Right.
hawks.
Yeah,
They do the
true.
same thing.
I mean, I would personally, it's funny because this is one of the few cases where I would rather have lethal hits than sustained. Because in most cases, I was always a fan of, well, why don't Dire Avengers have sustained hits? It seems like they would, right? Because they have, the better shuriken catapults and stuff. Back in the day, in 5th edition, they had Blade Storm, which back then it just gave you more attacks. So it makes sense that they would have that. But, this is one of those cases where lethal hits is better, quite frankly.
Yeah, it's
You know?
sick on your Overwatch. Yeah, on your Overwatch too.
Absolutely. Getting those auto wounds is good, especially when you have a low strength. And Azurman's good too. I mean, Azurman's great. I just think he's a lot of points. But if you
For
can
sure.
leverage his combat as well as his, ability to Overwatch, he can definitely be worth his points. He's one of those characters that's kind of a higher skill level, I think, to use.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say 9 times out of 10, I would get the unit's points back at least.
Yeah. Yeah,
The
if you
entire
use them
unit,
well. I
you
mean,
know.
that was kind of the same way with me until my buddies started running more vehicles. And then it was a little tougher, but I mean, still they're pretty good. They're
That's a
pretty
whole other
good.
thing. I think there's must be like a sweet spot of the amount of bright lances we should run in any given list.
I've actually,
I I run very minimum, and I
yeah,
just feel like it's a problem for me all the time because I'm like, oh, I have two bright lances, cool.
and they just never do anything.
Like,
Yeah,
right. When they
no.
do, I'm like, yeah, baby,
Well, what's
8 damage.
funny is
But
like in ninth edition, that was how bright lances were. They just sucked. I mean, really, no one took that many bright lances. People had to take different anti-vehicle options, anti-large options, like D cannons. Bright lances were so bad last edition. I hated them. This edition, they're quite a bit better, obviously, but they
yeah,
still miss and they still don't do well sometimes because of the amount of toughness that vehicles have
yeah, but they
and
can't miss
stuff.
because we reroll everything.
I can't I can't tell you how many times I've had a Warwalker just roll double ones right out of the gate, and I reroll one, and it
Uh,
it rolls a two, dude. I mean, like so many times, and you guys out there can contest. Like bright lances sometimes just do not do it. Like when you have the weighted dice, it's much more reassuring. Like that's why I love fire dragons, because you get 5 dice to roll. And yeah, you may miss three, but you get that reroll, and that way you're at least probably hitting 3 times, even if you roll terribly on them, because you should only be missing two, and then with the rerolls you should hit. So you should hit about 4 times, right?
how
Um,
much anti-tank would you run in a Bealtan list?
well, if I was running Beal-Tan as like a theme,
For the most part, like the infantry aren't really good
it
tank
they're
busters.
not.
Yes,
I'd
fire dragons,
probably
but I mean not
run,
really.
yeah, I'd probably run 3 units of fire dragons for sure,
Well,
like with
yeah,
Fuegan and
it's just
Falcons.
the Falcons. Yeah, I guess Falcons would be the way to go.
And then if I wanted more anti-tank, I would probably,
The wave serpents,
yeah, Wave Serpent Brightlands is
Falcons
okay,
and
I guess.
serpents. Yeah,
Yeah. But yeah, 3 units of dragons is pretty strong against it. And just the other thing is like if you need like to deal with tanks, like the Falcons have tank shock, fire dragons have grenades, swooping hawks have grenades. Like there's things you can do to kind of like get around that. Like it's
yeah,
not like the old days where like grenades couldn't deal damage against tanks and neither could neither could like swooping hawks. Like you have the lethals, you have the ability to take down tanks with other stuff. But yeah, for sure, fire dragons are a great one. Um, Fuegan is also a good anti-tank piece. I mean, he could do 12 damage just by
yeah,
himself,
himself, right?
right? Like he's great. He's a world beater. And
Just,
yeah,
just last. Yeah.
Yeah, what were we gonna say?
I was gonna say this last tournament I went to, I kept running into problems of like I was just running out of units so fast.
Yeah,
Just because like everything's so expensive now in our lists, like
for sure.
unless you're running, that sort of MSU style list,
Which
you
is
don't have much on the board.
yeah, and that's why I think it's so strong because you know if you are playing Eldar at this point in the game and you're playing them competitively, running a 10 pack of anything is a big investment. You know.
Right. So brings me to my next theory. We just start playing junk.
Yeah.
That's kind of a list I played a couple of years ago. But you basically just play ones or twos of like everything in the book. You just throw the book at them
Right.
and just
Yeah.
do things because you're Eldar.
Well, that's exactly
But
what the aspect warrior armies are doing.
yeah, exactly. In turn, you have like 20 units or whatever.
Oh yeah, because you can
15 to 20
run
units.
times three hawks, times three dark reapers, times three fire dragons. Like you can run all
Right.
that stuff, and you could literally do what you just said. Like, and that type of list, very good at scoring secondaries, very good at trading because you don't have to commit, right? Like the key to playing Eldar well is knowing exactly how much you can commit and get away with, right?
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
minimum size units really help you to kind of fine tune the amount of commitment you want to give to any one turn. And it's really what makes Eldar strong. And, I mean, as much as I love running the big giant combos of stuff, I mean, we even talked about a big giant combo right here against Green Tide.
Oh yeah.
And I think you do need some of those pieces in your list. And obviously you can protect them with things like fire, like Wind Riders you can protect with the Fire and Fade, right? Dire
Yeah.
Avengers, like that's your unit that's going to probably be on the front lines. It's going to die, but it's going to go down hitting, more killing more points than it was worth or, breaking even or, whatever.
Right.
Being a distraction to the enemy that your opponent can't ignore and, kind of dictating the battle. But
All,
most of your units probably should be MSU because if you just go all 10 mans in your army, like you said, you're going to commit hard and then you're going to lose too much in return.
I think I think what you're telling me, Proxy, is all roads lead to the triple way leaper list.
Yes, dude, definitely, man. For sure. They lead there. Triple wheel leaper, dude. You need to run that at some point. I thought you were gonna run it in this latest RTT you're at, and you went ahead
No,
and you just ran
I ran
something
20
else.
spiders. I ran 20 spiders, which was a
Nice.
riot though.
No, it sounds
I can't.
fun
I want to do that again, honestly.
for sure. But yeah, man, that's absolutely hilarious. I
It's
think,
it's so nutty. I think it could be really good, honestly.
yeah, we'll have
It has
to
potential
we'll have
because
to
you
talk
could.
about that at some point. The spider kind of
I I
strategy,
I
spider
wasn't as
strats.
careful with them as I should have been,
Mhm.
but they also just show up out of nowhere and nuke things.
Yeah, they
Like,
do. And
bye.
you know what I like about them? They can really spike damage sometimes. Like sometimes they won't do
Exactly.
enough,
If
but
they spike, it's
sometimes they'll
wild.
just I mean, in the beginning of the edition I ran 10 of them and I remember walking up to, my opponent's like Razorback or something like that and just blowing it away.
Just deleting it. Yeah.
Delete. Like and he was like, "Dude, what?" And that was back when they were cheaper. He was like,
Yeah.
they're broken." And then of
My first
course,
game. My
I
first game against
yeah.
Chaos, there was this man was playing 3 Venom crawlers. The Warp Spiders, just a 10 pack alone, was able to pop 2 of them. Almost
Wow.
killed a third.
How many wounds did they have? 9? 9 apiece?
Yeah, they got like 9. Yeah, so
Yeah.
they were hitting. They hit the 2 of them for 9. Just the 10 pack did.
That's great.
Yeah, it was nuts. They didn't kill the third one, but
Well, that's still awesome. I mean, that's still really cool to
they're
kill that.
super cheeky, and it makes me really want to try 30
Oh, big
because
time.
I feel at that point you can just kill things that are a lot tougher to kill.
Yeah, true. It is also very swingy though, so you have to
It
keep
is,
that in mind.
yeah,
You could end
for
up doing
sure.
nothing. I mean, I've seen the amount of times I've shot 5, even just 5 at something and
Yeah,
gotten
but that's
no mortals, no
Proxy. That's
devastating.
why the XRs have power blades.
But you can't charge after you warp jump, man, which sucks. You know?
Phantasm.
Yeah, true. Or you could just You could just move them
Fire and fade,
normally.
fire and
Do they
fade
have
with
move
them is
12?
silly too.
Yeah, fire and fade with them is good, but you can only fire and fade 12, which was one of
Yeah,
the
but you move 24 and then move
yeah.
another 12.
Oh,
Like
for sure. Like I think if you're running a 10 pack,
we
it's definitely worth fire and fading for sure.
no,
Like
yeah, yeah,
killing something on the left-hand side of the battlefield and fire and fading right behind a ruin, like so your opponent basically just can't shoot them is like great. You know,
exactly,
and then the funny thing is if they try to assault them, they or get overwatched again.
exactly.
Yeah,
That's
it's clever.
yeah. So
It's clever.
I would throw all 20 into one zone, pick off a unit, and then if they yeah, then they got Overwatch to fire a third time. Like it's crazy.
Yeah. We're gonna have to talk about warp spiders definitely in a different video and try to fit some strategies around that. But for you guys out there listening, I think if you're having trouble with green tide, if that's something that's in your area, definitely try out Dire Avengers with the Zerman and maybe combo it with some Wind Riders because at least from the math perspective, if you position your units well, you could be killing 2 units of orc boys a turn, like clockwork, like a machine, if you have this going on and your positioning is good. So definitely try that out at home. And Dead of Night, do you have any closing remarks before we call it a night?
Yeah, play the Dire Avengers. I think everybody would like them if they just played with them. You have to play a few games with them too because they're gonna die
Right.
and you're gonna be discouraged.
Yeah, the positioning on them has to be very good, and you have to know the matchup. Like if you're going against something with no shooting like orcs, it's definitely safe to put them on that objective in the middle. But if you're going against something that can just shoot and stay outside of the 18-inch range that they have, they're not going to do it for you. So you might as well put them in reserve and rapid ingress them in
don't
because,
don't be afraid to use your Overwatch if you're only hitting on fives. Like that's
hmm
still just okay,
yep,
cool, that's great.
for sure.
You
Yeah,
know,
don't put them in a position they're just going to die if just for the 4+, right?
I,
Like,
I I
you
I
know,
would not leave them. I would hide them unless like if they're not guided, you hide them. You want them guided.
right, for sure. Absolutely. All right. Good advice from Dead of Night. The Eldar. What do we need to call you?
I don't even know.
The
Let them
Eldar
figure it
Maverick.
out.
We'll call you the Eldar Maverick. He's a maverick,
Gang
ladies and
Master
gentlemen.
5000.
Oh my gosh. You are kind of a maverick of the Eldar. I like that about you.
I just play the weird things.
Yeah. Well, that's what we all love. All right, man. Well, I'm gonna
Thanks,
let you
Proxy.
go because I know it's like really late for you. So thanks for
Oh, it's
joining me
okay.
today, and we'll have to do this again soon. For those of you out there who are interested in joining the channel's Discord, I have free trials activated on my Patreon, which will grant you access to the Discord. We're really looking for new members. If you play Eldar out there or you like the Eldar, definitely consider joining. I will leave the link in the description for you guys. Thank you so much to all the patrons and supporters who have supported the channel as well. And if you want to grab some Eldar inspired apparel or discounted Eldar minis on Amazon, I will leave the links in the description for those, both the Amazon affiliate link and the channel store page link. All right, everybody, that's going to be it for today's video. Peace out, and I'll see you guys next time. Have a good one, guys.
Toodles.